Hello, Viti. Good morning. Today we are revise your lesson on the face of it. Introduction of the lesson. The story speaks about two individuals who meet unfortunate odds, but develop different attitudes while facing those odds. Odds means difficulties. The two persons are Derry, a young acid attack victim, and Mr. Lamb, much older man who lost his limb in a blast. Limb means leg. Through the contrast in the outlook of both these survivors, the author tried to create a tale of overcoming odds and seemingly insurmountable difficulties, retaining hope in the ability to find happiness. Okay? Derry, a 14 years old boy. The story begins Derry, a 14-year-old boy, strolling, walking into a garden, hoping to not find anyone there, having suffered an acid injury that burnt almost half of his face. He had become a reclusive and pessimistic negative thinker, and therefore, he tended to be isolated and aloof and avoid interaction with people. However, he was not alone in the garden. Suddenly, a man with a tin leg appeared in front of him and engaged in a conversation with him. Mr. Lamb was completely opposite of Derry. He is a positive thinker. He had learned to be content with his deformity and find meaning in his life. Derry, on the other hand, was young, angry, confused boy. He thought nobody could ever love him because they feared him. He was so self-conscious that he hated his own face and thought only his mother loved him. She only loved him only because she was her son, thought young Diary. And Mr. Lambs narrates his experience. What was his experience? He discussed. Mr. Lamb said that he also used to think like that, but time heals every wound. He gives an analogy of bees that irritate people with their buzzing, but if one observes and hears them patiently, one will find music in their sound. Analogy means example of bees that compare with music sound, and Derry confused that he was disturbed by other people's comments and stare, and therefore felt comfortable in seclusion, in loneliness. Mr. Lamb reassured him there are many who are a lot worse than him and he can still do whatever he wants. He still had his limbs, eyes, ears, etc. to fulfill all his dreams. Mr. Lamb tells him that after his leg got blown off in a blast, he conquered his own fear. He learned to walk and even climb trees. He welcomed Derry to join him in plucking apples off his trees when or if he comes back. Mr. Lamb encourages Derry. Mr. Lamb tries to encourage Derry to embrace all of his abilities that God had given him and not just focus on his own flaw. He tells him that he lives in a house without curtain and keeps his door open for others. He wants to be friendly everyone and advises Derry that hate and anger is worse than any kind of corrosive acid. Corrosive means any kind of acid. Derry narrates another incident when he heard his parents talking about his deformity and that they thought he would die with his deformity. This was really tough for Derry to take. Even his relatives thought he would be at peace in hospital with other persons with deformities. Mr. Lamb assured Derry that people get tired of talking and staring eventually. He needed to not concentrate on what they rather and focus on his own aspiration and abilities. More advice. Mr. Lamb also tell him that the world and the people living in it will gradually move on to some other new thing or person to critique you or notice. He should not waste away his life by wondering on other people's opinion of him, confusing on other people's opinions on him. He tells Derry a story of a man who stayed inside his house because he feared death by an accident. However, in the end, he died inside his room when a painting fell over his head. Thus, even Derry should come out of his room of fear and embrace the outside world and its people. He calls Derry his friend, even thought that Derry not reciprocate the same feeling. Derry says that he would never return to the garden, so he could not call Mr. Lamb a friend. Mr. Lamb asserted that the same fact did not make them enemies also. He reiterated that they were friends and that Derry is always welcome to his garden. Derry opens up. Derry tells Mr. Lamb that if he comes to his garden, all his other friends will get scared of his face and Mr. Lamb will lose his friend. Mr. Lamb consoles him by saying that kids often call him by funny names like Lammy Lamb, but still come back to his garden. Derry finally expresses some optimism and hopes to have a house without curtain of his own. He too wants to live in the light of faith and self belief, come out of the shadows of self doubt and fear. Ending of the chapter. Derry then returns home to his mother and narrates his encounter with Mr. Lamb. She wants him to stay away from Mr. Lamb, who she thought was a dangerous person. However, Derry defies her injections and returned to Mr. Lamb's garden. He was finally free all of his inhibitions, all thanks to the encouragement and decomforting words of Mr. Lamb. However, he returned to see Mr. Lamb lying flat on the ground. The ladder had slipped from the tree and Mr. Lamb had suffered a terrible fall. He lay there, unmoved, injured. The story ends with Derry breaking into melancholic tears, sad tears, in sadness. Okay, this is your revision lectures on the face of it. I hope you should all understand and prepare your test on Monday. Thank you. Have a nice day.